Good to see you. Computer knowledge. Say you guys. Where are you going from? Seeing them like I saw home. So it's like, yeah, I mean, just like half an hour back, it's so happy, it's so very nice. I started at 5, so I was supposed to come to office, and I got meetings and calls, and then party will be face to face. But 7 is 5, and I didn't go face to face. So I get started, then I go.
Hello. So good evening, everyone. This is Veerpata Patil from Skillemme. Today we have a session on welcome to Beyond Paychecks, designing the experience employees stay for, part of the future of work conversations powered by Skillemme. At Skillemme, we help organizations build skills, leaders, and cultures where people want to stay and grow. Today, we will explore what employee value proposition really means beyond perks, why it's everyone's responsibility, and how it drives retention, culture, and engagement. So it's my pleasure to introduce our speaker for today, Mr. Aravind Warrier, HR leader, lead people and culture at Volvo India, a seasoned HR professional with over 20 years of experience across diverse sectors, including information technology, manufacturing, and pharmaceuticals, working with both leading MNCs and Indian companies. Aravind has partnered closely with business leaders on mission-critical projects, bringing a strategic perspective to HR, organization development, and talent management. So his expertise spans across employee engagement, talent acquisition, leadership development, HR audits, and PCMM and PEMM deployment. Passionate about continuous learning, he is equally committed to developing and coaching teams, a motivational speaker and advisory member for several leading business schools across India. So Aravind brings both depth and knowledge and an inspiring perspective to today's conversation. And today, the moderator of the session would be Mr. Saurabh Gupta, co-founder at Frogo and advisor for Skillemme for the session. So we can get started.
Thank you so much, Patil. And welcome, Aravind, in this session. First of all, this entire session and the introduction which we will give, which sounds very exciting. People and culture is a galaxy in itself. And the topic of today, that is EVP. So I have built a lot of MVPs in my career. Now, EVP stands very, a new term for me, and I'm sure you have a lot of information to share with us. So what exactly EVP is, it's going to be very useful for the viewers here.
Fantastic. So really humble and honored. I think like minimum viable product, I think when we started speaking about employee value proposition, I mean employer value proposition or employment value proposition also. But then the whole idea of EVP is just asking a simple question from the other side's perspective, like why should I join an organization? What is the reason that, or what is the purpose behind me joining an organization? And EVP is the answer for that. Why should someone join an organization? And that definition, the founders or the so-called organization, if they can really craft that narrative, it becomes a great statement for people to come really work. And that's something which we should be looking for. The EVP is just a small this one in terms of the brand building excess, because you have in the war of talent, this is something which really separates good from great. And EVP in a normal language is in branding terminology, it says what kind of experience you want to give to people who are going to join your organization. It's as simple as that. Thank you.
That's a great perspective, and having spent quite a few years in the industry, Aravind, I've always seen that the employee journey starts a little before they actually get onboarded in the organization. So, in the entire timeline of the employee, the onboarding by the time they get operational in the job, where do you feel the EVP plays a major role? Is it before they step in the organization or after they step in the organization?
Brilliant question. I think most of the times what we see is basically when you say about the so-called employment value proposition or whatever terminology you have to say, most of us we get stuck either to something called an onboarding exercise or an talent acquisition exercise. It is not one stop kind of exercise. It's something which has to be there from the whole of like a product life cycle. It's something where you've got to really curate it, put it across the entire employee life cycle journey. Because when you stop it, because the first thing is you attract the talent. That's only one piece of the puzzle. What about retaining them? What about motivating them? What about developing them? These are the areas which, because EVP is something which is showcased to the world that you join because these set of reasons are there. But after that, if you don't do it, that's when EVP takes a back seat. And most of us, the first thing is easy to showcase that we are doing this, but sustaining is the key element of this in the whole scheme of things. I think it is not one-stop exercise of a TA person or a talent acquisition team or a so-called onboarding team does this as an exercise. But how do the great organizations sustain it through great managers, great leaders, and great business partners? That's the whole idea.
Great. Now, does it overlaps with the employee branding at some point in time? Do you see that there is a cross section of these two initiatives in an organization?
Absolutely, yes. I think the so-called employment value proposition only says, why should you join a great brand like us?
Okay.
That's the simplest thing because if that answer is there, and it may not be like a vision statement or a mission statement, a very lengthy thing. It just says you should join because we really value something for your career. Especially when we have the war of talent, when we are having so much of talents across, your so-called value proposition has to be very unique. Because at the end, for us, at least in HR, for us, our customers are our great employees. For business, if customers are your assets, same way you got to treat your employees as great assets. And that only happens when you really value them, really acknowledge what they bring in. So that's where the whole proposition lies. Because at the end, why should you buy your product? Same thing is what employees are going to ask.
And that's a great point. That
In the simple terminology of marketing or setting, I would say this is your USP now. You got to have that USP which can be crafted through your EVP. That's the whole chain. That's how the whole chain works.
and totally agree. I couldn't agree more that employees are the true assets. And
Absolutely.
before they step in the organization, they need to start feeling that particular, they need to start getting the sense of that they're being treated as an asset throughout the onboarding journey. Now, as I said, that are there any cross paths with the your employee branding? Now, if I ask you to share some real experiences, that how do you chart that EVP journey for an employee, and maybe that differs for employees coming at different levels, at associate and the leadership level, how does that differ? What are the key points that you would emphasize upon when you're probably selling a role or say, hiring for a role at different levels in an organization?
Super. I think you made me feel that I'm getting old. Thank you for that. Most important thing is very important, very pertinent question because EVP again, as much you can bring in the so-called personalization aspect, it's going to create that kind of experience. At the end, I really need to customize and personalize that kind of experience because in the world of Gartner, what they say is now we don't have employer, employee, or employment value proposition. They have called it like experience value proposition. Because if you got to give your customers experience, for me, my customers are my employees. So I always say that experience is not about giving all big packets of Ferrero Rochers alone. But more than that, what you speak, what you think, what you act, does it really create value, impact, and contribution to your employee? That's where the experience starts. Because I think more or less, more than spending time, I'm just trying to be little funny here. The fact of the matter is more than spending so much of time in your home, the employee is spending time with your manager in the organization, considering or plus or minus the traffic. So you got to be really considerate in whatever you do it.
Yeah.
So in first, if you can segment it, very good. and then target the whole population, and then position your EVP at different levels, that's when the excitement starts. So segmenting is important because the so-called EVP is going to remain the same, but the way you executed it or the way you deliver that content at different stakeholders vary actually. Let's assume we would like to sit in a class and still enjoy it. For the so-called millennials and generations that they would like to go for MOOCs, massive open online courses, and they want that kind of freedom, autonomy. So that's how the whole programs or your so-called everything should be crafted. It's not really one cookie cutter. That's my philosophy of life.
That's true. Yeah. So your growth must be overarching around people and culture before they get into the organization. After they step into the organization, they get familiarized with the role. How does EVP plays a role once the employees are in their roles, right? And how does that connect with the culture of the organization? Because once I know that these are my USPs, I got into the role. Now I'm regular at the office. How does that plays with the cultural elements?
I think just need to do only two things. Even I can say a lot of things around the so-called EVP, the parameters or probably the components of that. It could be around the so-called technology to the product to your rewards to health and well-being. Many components we can mention. But at the end, if you look at anyone in the segmenting or the targeting, this one, it's around. I always believe it's around F and E, feedback and expectation setting, because gone are those days when people will just come there and then do something which is there in the redundant paper called your job description. Nowadays, people want to know what exactly I'm doing. Am I really part of the whole big purpose? And that excites them. So expectation setting, as you rightly said, the day when someone joins, beyond if you have to offer him all Ferrero Rochers and boxes and all these things, that's one good thing. But beyond that, they ask, what is my contribution to the whole scheme of things? Number one. Number two, if I do eventually, what is my career path? What is my learning path? Nowadays, if you ask the so-called generation millennials, one of the things is what excitement they get is basically, am I doing something very challenging, which is really contributing to the bigger purpose? Number two, what exactly is my learning path? Earlier, we used to ask a career path. So they want to know, really, is it really giving me that kick in terms of my growth? Because technology is moving aside. And I always say it's not the world of artificial intelligence anymore, it's augmented intelligence. That's what people are looking forward to. Not sure if I've answered your question right.
Absolutely. I mean, you gave me a new term, a new perspective to the AI. So now, since we are talking about AI, I'm sure with the advancements going on, not just about the AI, but the overall technological advancements going on, has technology, or say, should technology play a role, or has it got something to play a role in building an EVP for the employees?
Okay. Technology is never a substitute, is what I feel. And that's when I was forced to use a word called augmented intelligence. Because at the end, you bet on people, not on technology. I think one of the great writers have spoken about this from a book called Execution. So the most important thing is whether you're craft, because at the end, when someone is joining an organization, you cannot say you have a robot, just speak to him or her. The robot will take care of this one. At the end, you really need a human element, which I would always feel at the end is about VUCA. It's not volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous, but it's all about making someone feel valued, understood, cared, and acknowledged. And that's what world is looking forward for. Even you have the best of the best technologies in, at the end, you bet on people who are really going to give your company a mileage. So you're going to really have that in anything and everything you do. And that's the next set of challenge which we are encountering.
And I guess you gave me the point, gave me the segment to the next question. I was going to ask you about that. For the viewers, are there any frameworks of EVP that someone who is starting new in this segment, in this field, for the HRs all in this session, what frameworks they can get started with and what maturity level they can follow to reach an extent where they say that probably put a metric around it, that this percentage of EVP we have achieved, or this much is the role technology has played a role here, something, some insights from your experience.
What gets measured gets improved. So I think more than model, actually, I mean, definitely, yes, there are a lot of models from, I always been following Gartner. So Gartner's model is the experience value proposition. And most important thing is, it's not about just keeping that model and then saying that we are doing this. But as you rightly pointed, what exactly, where were you X And it's through your so-called actions or so-called deliverables, not doables, is that creating an impact to the people who are joining it. So frequently having your connects, frequently having that touch points, or probably frequently having the surveys and or feedback mechanisms will help us where we stand. Most important, if our own employees don't understand, that means we have a problem. Most of us, we try to showcase a lot of things to the outside world. So first and foremost, if there's a shared mindset or shared understanding of EVP within the organization, that is the first metric we've got to check. Most of the times we try to say that, okay, outside perspective is good. When you ask employees also, they'll say, oh, I know everything. But then you've got to ask your employees if they are really understanding. Because tomorrow we need to understand some of the internal employees are going to be buddies, some of them are going to be mentors, some of them are going to be coaches. So they have to be evangelists of the so-called EVP. If they themselves don't understand, I think that's one metric we have got to look at.
Yeah.
And I think consistent reinforcing of these things only will make the difference. Because if they don't feel your EVP is right, they're not going to propagate it. That's the simplest metric I can think of. Of course, yes, I can say a lot of this one, your NPS score, net promoter score, and other things also. But then beyond that, your internal employees, the NPS is good. Probably that's the best metric I can look at.
Great. I like this from the topic from the theoretical point of it, and let's talk about the trend. So there was one of the recent trend, or say incident, where one of the HR of a startup she ranted his or her experience over LinkedIn, that a person joins and the moment they get the salary, after 5 minutes or so, they just put down the papers. There are a lot of such experiences we keep on hearing, not just from the startup world, but even in the corporates. I'm seeing that thing is happening. So throw your light on incidents like this, and how do we connect it with the EVP frameworks?
Okay. I always, this is something which I've been pondering also about. It's like this word called experience, right? Experience. It's not. It's something which every person, because every person feels it in a different levels, and the equation is very different. But the most important thing is when someone joins, the word called respect, trust, and all those things. These kind of words, which is not just simply written there, can be exhibited from the leaders, and if it can be cascaded to the managers, that's where you're setting the first layer of EVP.
Absolutely.
And sometimes that is missed. Because you say that when you join, you're going to get rewards, you're going to work in all this kind of technology. That's fine. But at the end, when you talk to someone, when someone feels that you're not being valued and supported, these are very important words. Let's say you join the best of the best companies and you don't feel supported. That day itself, this engagement starts. I'm not speaking about not engagement. Engagement's opposite is not disengagement. It's not engagement. And we are talking about disengagement, where people will go outside and say that never join here and all these kind of things. That's a dangerous thing. So I think managers have to pick up the whole thing and then start working on this experience part. It cannot be something which can be written or theoretically learned, and never it can be trained. I think it's a common sense which you have to do it as a part of a job role.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean,
And actually, and most important thing is, I go back to the same thing. More than spending time at your home, employees are spending time at your office.
Yes.
So you really need to take care of them. And they don't just work for the so-called organization, they work for the managers who really create impact in their life. That's why the role model and all this kind of works are really important also.
True. And yeah, I totally agree with you that cultural elements play a lot of role
Very much.
in retention.
That's a DNA.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. So how do you deal with this? Like how, at what moment, or what are those cues which hint that there are certain cultural elements which are not in this way, certain way, or expected way, and how do you bring or reinforce, coming back to your previous point, that you have to continuously reinforce the EVP pointers. So how do you connect back? What are the alarms? What are the alerts that the system sees?
See, we have been speaking a lot about these days. If you happen to say anywhere and everywhere, we've been speaking about health and wellness. Correct. So health and wellness is not about the physical gym, what you offer. If let's assume one of your teammates, probably that teammate was okay till Wednesday, and then Thursday and Friday you see there's a dip, and that person is getting isolated. He or she is not able to come and talk to you. He or he is keeping that isolated kind of environment. It's very important manager steps in and solves the problem then and there, right? And in the terminology of business, what everyone is right now speaking is about psychological safety, where I can question things, where I can challenge things, where I can also learn and collaborate. If these three things, these four things are not there, probably he or she will start, separating from the whole set of crowd. And that is one indicator the person as a manager you should really keep a sense of. Because right now you never know, everyone is fighting his or her battle. But early indicators of this kind, if you can really talk to him or her, that's when you make a difference. And these things again you cannot teach him or her.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's a client element. That's about the psychological climate or this kind of we say psychological flexibility or whatever we say, and that has to be really demonstrated by the manager. You can speak to me. I'm open to hear you out. All those conversations when you say it, and when you really do it, others will start speaking, saying that I feel that my manager is open to questioning things and challenging things. That is very important in this era going forward, because generations will question. And if you are not okay to accept the feedback, setting the expectations, and not okay with questioning things, it's a clear indicator that you're not giving a great experience to your so-called team.
Great.
And it's an emotionally intelligent teams which I'm talking. Everyone is really good. And because EQ might come down going forward, because you're really looking at IQ increase through the AI. So EQ is very important.
I can see your role will revolve around a lot of psychological elements.
That's right.
And one of the biggest sort of challenge in my career, I've seen that how do you translate those psychological elements or psychological expectations on paper, and then the framework, and then you sort of reinforce it to the culture and ask them to follow.
You just nailed it. And these frameworks are not just theoretical aspects. I'll reinforce that. This theoretical aspect is something which they make you expand your perspectives and put it to action. That's when really you're making a difference. Most of the times, theory is good to understand, but practically you got to see how you can implement it in that particular scenario. If X company is doing it, immediately let's also do it, benchmark and do it. No, then you are really not doing what is really required, because every structure has got a different set of culture, and that culture also gets cascaded in the form of climate. So you need to understand all those nuances also.
True.
Because that comes or gets cascaded from the leader, and that's the most important piece.
So I feel like there's a lot of responsibility on the managerial and leadership
Absolutely.
positions to make sure that the EVP and the metrics levels are intact and are at the levels where you can, like, company goes on a prolonged track of stability and sustainability. So how do you carry on these? How do you design these programs for managers, leaders, and are there any like modules which can be started, which can be given to the employee base who are at the associate level, who are still growing at that level and probably achieving the leadership position at some point in time in their career? How do you design these programs?
Number one is basically you said trainings, right? I think more than training, we should be having sessions around thinking. Okay. Well, thinking is basically you bring people to a focus group discussions and start asking them a lot of kind of experiences cases. Because when managers start opening up, one particular person says that yes, I was vulnerable to this kind of this one, but when I really reflected, I have to change. That's when you're really embedding that kind of change. Number one. Number two, also ensure you have reinforcement from the top leaders. Let's assume managers, because it can be new manager, probably he's also coming from a comfort zone to a new zone. So you really need to understand the new manager development programs are really, really done by the leaders, where they say that you as an organization culture or as an organization evangelist, you have to do the experience part. It is not something given to a marketing team or an HR team. It's everyone's job. I think that is something which has to come from the leadership, and he or she sets the so-called psychological safety in place. And if we are not able to do that, then probably buying is going to be very difficult. Because and that's when the role modeling and all those things, we really believe in that.
Great. Now, one of the things that, as an organization, Skillemme focuses a lot on the upskilling and reskilling. So, do you think that what consistent upskilling and reskilling of the leadership, not just from the EVP standpoint, but from the external exposure standpoint, that these are the industry trends and this is how the behavioral skills are taking the fold. Does that plays a role that what's going on in the industry cross-folded with your EVP programs?
Yes. See, one of the important aspects which has been there in the past, right now also we have it in future also, is we are discussing about the learning path. I always believe the generations going forward, they'll always look at only three things: upskilling, reskilling, and cross skilling. You are sees the norm. As long you have that learning appetite to learn more and ensure your learning paths are going ahead, the organizations would survive. Otherwise, the people going forward, they'll say, okay, I don't see any kind of learning. And when I say learning, it's also learning on the ground, learning from experiences. It's not just purely the textbooks or the certifications alone, where I can really apply it. And if you really ask me, on the job kind of what do you trainings are more effective than so-called theoretical. Right? That's why we have the 70, 20, 10 kind of frameworks also, which always says that the 10% on the job, 20% through the mentoring, and the 70%, sorry, the 70% through the on the job, 20% through the mentoring, and the 10% through the classrooms. That's how the whole philosophy is. The 70% really creates an impact because you do three things: learning, unlearning, and real rules.
Yeah. So if I just ask you to just quickly switch the roles,
Sure.
right? So
Tough question for you now.
how does what's the overall feedback from the say leadership, managerial roles? What's their perspective about EVP? How do you invite the feedback from them if you need to recalibrate or just calibrate your EVP programs? What's the channel do you follow? What's their overall feedback, observations about EVP? Do they feel good or do they feel or say enforced about following these programs?
Very good question. I think whoever is listening, it's a good, fantastic thought process. Uh, the most important thing is EVP is not HR's job. I firmly believe it's not an HR's job. Probably what happens is at the end, talent works for managers. Talent works for the organization. So really, the experience part starts from the top. So all managers in HR or whatever marketing or sales, we just facilitate the whole experience piece. So what I always believe, I'm sure some of you would have read a fantastic book from McKinsey, The Power to the Middle, which says middle managers are important. You cannot start removing them because they take the heat from all sides. They get sandwiched. So most important thing, telling them the experience piece is very important because they have to manage the entire gamut of job or your so-called daily task. And beyond that, they do that 80% thing about people management. And people management, you ask me, that's the most sophisticated and sometimes the most disinterested kind of solution. So I think telling them their role is important in the whole scheme of things would make the difference. Sometimes other departments takes this one, saying that okay, it is marketing job. No, it's actually the manager really makes the difference. We should really enable and empower them to do this kind of things. Because at the end, when we go to theater, we just don't go to theater just because of that. Because we go to certain theaters or maybe certain hotels because they give you an experience. That's what one should be looking at. And at the end, it's all about making someone feel valued, understood, cared, and acknowledged. The generation future or the millennials, whatever we're talking about, they need it.
Any experiences that you can share? I'm sure viewers must be eager to know from you that any experiences where certain, say, EVP policies have been rolled out or certain experiences have been built, but the leadership position comes back to you and say that it's not going well, or there's certain thing, there's certain pushback from their teams.
Okay, I'll take this, I'll reframe it, and then I'll confuse and convince you again. In fact, one of the important asks is basically everyone now, any organizations for that matter, the first important thing is what exactly do you really, and this is an ask from all the employees across any kind of organization, because I do my routine checks with my other set of colleagues also, so they've also been saying, do you really have health and mental wellness programs in your organizations? And most important thing is, it's not about giving only counseling. It's not about just having a gym. It is not about having a lot of financial, this one also. It's beyond the so-called, what do you say, do you really have places where your manager also facilitates your growth? Number one, do you have one-to-one discussions when he or she is open to receive your thoughts? Number three, do you really have avenues for people to really contribute to the bigger this one? I'm sure you would have heard about innovation and all those things. But when it comes to innovation, they would also say, that, no, you cannot do beyond this.
Yeah.
So you're literally stopping him or her.
Yes.
So these are the small things which I think at a long or a larger scale leaders can look at, because sometimes it's not the policies alone, but really looking into this, whether it is really giving that kind of experience, a rethought or going back and checking it, that can make a difference. And sometimes we really need to understand, do you really have to benchmark things from the other set of organizations or industries? That is also one of the mistakes we normally do it also at times. Because we feel, okay, X is doing it, let's also do it. Need not be, because our culture, the so-called DNA is different. And the structure at which we operate is different. The whole way of seeing the business model is different. So it varies.
So if I just open up a concept of EVP at the industry level, are there any certain standards or certain governance institutions which laid out certain rules?
No,
Just for my understanding,
No.
I'm sure.
no, we don't. We cannot say this because as for my limited knowledge of probably my educational level of understanding, that we cannot have a framework or an audit thing saying that this is a set of things you should be doing. But if we can think beyond it, but I was just saying we normally have been going through the Gartner models, Gartner's one framework, which has been speaking a lot about the EVPs. Now the experience value proposition, which I was talking about. If you look at it, they say if you do this, you will also see an incremental increase in the so-called engagement levels. You will also see the satisfaction levels going up. So probably more than just seeing and replicating it, you really can you really tweak it and see whether what all areas you can apply. It's not only one area of set of things we can do it across at any levels we can think of. Beyond going the models, can you really do some simple things? I'll just tell you one thing. You just asked me the first or second question where different segments would need different EVP, right? Yes. A gamification will not work at a leadership level. It may or may not. But trying it out or taking the risk and the most important thing, the experimentation mindset can make a difference. And that's what we should be looking at also. Most of the times, you cannot say that this is a standard 5 elements which we are not going to attack. No, there are other set of things which you can say. My organization gives a lot of mentoring sessions. So you can always say mentoring as you can showcase this is what it is. But you've got to, when someone comes in, if he sees nothing is happening, that disconnect, you're spoiling that experience. That's what we should do.
Great. Aravind. So I come from the startup world. And I'm hearing a lot about the hashtag hustle culture.
Oh,
Okay. So first of all, does that play a role in the EVP? And I'm sure you would have a perspective around it, but for the viewers, help us understand what's the true definition of hustle culture is. And who is at the center of this hustle culture? Is it the people, employee, or the organization?
you put me in spot, but let me just try my best to
You're the
convince.
best one to answer.
I'll try my best either to confuse you or I'll convince you. Okay, so most important, hustle culture probably with my internal, what I feel is everyone does anything and everything in an organization, right? It's an hustle where you really try to, you don't have a rigid set of things. It's like you have set of things which you have to follow, but ensure you have the boundary limits within which you play your game. So I think at the end, hustle culture is all about the employees. These employees are the core. And if you look at this hustle culture, everything is built on a most important thing called trust. Right. And that is something which has to be showcased to the outside world also. Because trust is not easy. You trust someone, and that's why you have built that kind of hustle culture where everyone contributes. Everyone knows what they are contributing. The so-called expectations are also set, and you get the feedback on a constant and consistent basis. And that actually helps in driving the so-called impact to your so-called business.
And does it help the organization any?
I think initial days it is, but once the organization starts growing, probably having some kind of defined guidelines and all those things helps you to standardize many things. The question here is, do you want to see your organization as process-centric or people-centric? Because process-centric means you have a lot of standardization of things. People also feel that, okay, this particular person is getting many things beyond what I'm going to get. So this kind of small kind of things you can sort it when you have this kind of standardization of things. And when you make an organization process-centric.
Great. I think, yeah, that's so my understanding of hustling culture is a mix of different startups following their own perspective, opinions, understanding, format of hustling culture. For some, it is very fluid in culture, very open culture, which drives innovation.
Right.
And for many, the definition of hustle is do as I say or do as you want. Right? So, and from the corporate standpoint, how do you think that should these terms, which essentially define the culture of an organization, hustle, innovation, learning, how should they clubbed in the EVP story? Now, EVP is a holistic program which not just takes care of an employee in the organization, but before they are stepping in the organization, right? So how do you connect these points together? I'm sure EVP, within that EVP, will be training, there'll be different modules, different learning paths. If I need to come into organization and say that, I mean, help me understand, is the culture hustling one, or is it work-life balance maintained? I'll just talk about the terms which I keep on seeing on LinkedIn blogs. That is, how do you address this question for newbie coming to your organization?
Awesome. I think the whole piece revolves around three things: agility, innovation, and learning. Correct? The constant. If these three things are fueled, automatically you see the so-called hustling culture getting growing and all those things. I think the most important thing which I can think of is basically the nimbleness or the agility with which we really work on things. Because sometimes in a growing organizations, sometimes when you start moving, the agility starts dwindling. So the most important thing is agility, and most important for innovation and learning to happen, agility is the common thing. Now, just another thought which just came to mind is to all my leaders who are listening, and to you is also, is your organization really flexible, agile, adaptable, but why not adaptable? Because we speak about being flexible, we speak being agile, we also say that we are adapted. But the whole organization, the question should be, are my employees adaptable? Because adaptability is because you have told me I get adapted to it. Adaptability is whether my so-called SMB skill sets and mindsets and the behavior is really adapted to your philosophy. And in any kind of, and that's when learning and innovation starts. If you're only agile, a lot of people will start, as you rightly said, the fluid mechanisms happens. But if the so-called adaptability mindset is there, that's when you start growing also. Because you know, yes, those so-called systems don't have the defense mechanism, but I feel they are saying this because innovation is spurring up. And that's what the whole climate and the culture should enable also.
Very well said. I think few years back, one of the researches I was part of was on the people, process, and product. And we were arguing that where do you fit the agile, whether it should be part of the people or it should be the part of the product. And the reason was that people layer will keep on changing, or maybe they will stay for a certain time, but product is for the organization. So we need to find a way to plug in the agility component in the product itself. And there was a huge debate on this. So I just thought of quoting this here.
Thank you. Because I think you have agile kind of mindset, you'll also see that getting transformed into your products also.
Absolutely.
Because they start thinking, if me as an organization, or sorry, me as one of the micro organization, the whole scheme of things, if I can be agile, why not the other person? And that's when we also say that seeing things from the third person's perspective and all those things. I think the whole concept of design thinking is also around that.
Yeah.
You start seeing, okay, if I'm enjoying this, I'm having this kind of flexibility, agile kind of thought process, adaptability and adaptability. Why not I see that the same thing in your customer? That's why you have the great products come now, not good products.
Great. Any advices that you would have for our viewers who are probably starting their career in HR, people and culture and L&D, and something that organization can follow as the principle to make sure that their employees, they get pulled towards the organization to join instead of they going out and selling the roles in the market?
Awesome. I'll just reinforce which I have stolen or I have learned. It's always ensure your talent acquisition, talent development, talent engagement, and talent rewards and retention. All programs always have this VUCA applied in that. Whether the so-called policies or the guidelines or the process of what you have really makes the person feel valued, understood, cared, and acknowledged. Once you really do it, you don't have to worry much, because and also ensure your so-called managers and the leaders also do walk the talk. Most of the times, someone comes in, if new set of things is something which the person sees, that disconnect really makes him feel totally disengaged. And that is very dangerous. I think we should really have the VUCA or valued, understood, cared, and acknowledged kind of concept always be done in whatever we speak, think, and do. At the end, all of us really look for something called value, impact, and contribution through words, action, and thoughts. Thank you.
Great. I just do a quick check with Bean Bhadra. Are there any questions that we can take up?
Hi, Saurabh.
Hi.
Let me check if there are any questions. Looks like since it's a long weekend, people are in a hurry, maybe to head to places, where they are maybe traveling. Okay.
It's an experience, so we should not be troubling them.
Okay. Yeah. Looks like we don't have any questions as of now.
Sure.
Thank
Sure.
you.
So I will clean up the session. Thank you so much, Aravind, for your experience.
Thank you.
And thank you so much for sharing the insights which will just reflect the portion of experience that you have in this segment. And I wish you all the best.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Okay. So thank you. Warm regards to Mr. Saurabh also for moderating today's session. Thank you, Mr. Aravind, for sharing such valuable insights and practical perspectives on designing an employee value proposition that truly goes beyond paychecks. And thank you to everyone who have joined in for today's session. The session powered by Skillemme. So we hope today's discussion inspires everyone to look at your UVP not as a one-time initiative, but as a living promise that shapes how people experience and connect with your organization. As Mr. Aravind highlighted today, the future of work demands continuous upskilling, reskilling, and cross-skilling. At Skillemme, our motto also is in line with that, where it's called as reskilling, upskilling, and new skilling, which helping organization and individuals to stay future ready through impactful learning journeys. So if you're looking to strengthen your people, culture, and leadership capabilities, we'd be glad to partner with you. You can reach out to us on www.skillemme.com to explore how we can help you build your workplaces where people grow and stay. So we thank everyone for tuning in into this session and have a great extended weekend, all of you. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Yeah.